Hello friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start today's video with a warm-up story about an annoying customer. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Annoying customer complaining about getting less fluid than he paid for. So I don't work in the gastro industry anymore, but a friend of mine still does, and he perfected this one technique that I'm going to tell you about. For any US people, 1 deciliter is about 3.3 fluid ounces. Anytime a customer, it's always the unpleasant ones that do this, complain about getting a smaller drink, for example, 3 deciliters of fresh orange juice, and they think it's less because the glass doesn't look full, even though it's over 3 deciliters. Or they get a different glass because sometimes you run out of a certain type of glass, etc. Well, anytime they're rude and start complaining, my friends tell them to please wait and he'll fix their problem. While the customer waits in front of them, he proceeds to pull out a 1 deciliter measuring glass, starts measuring out exactly 3 deciliters and pouring them into another glass while looking directly at the customer. After he gets exactly 3 deciliters, he pours the rest of the drink in the sink while still looking directly at the customer. There's always at least 0.5 deciliters that goes into the sink. He then takes the new exact measured glass and hands it to said customer and says something along the lines of, "Here you go, sir, exactly 3 deciliters. Works like a charm," and they never complain again. I imagine the secret's to maintain eye contact, to assert dominance. And our second story. Nah, we don't need a professional to fell these trees. Okay. I live in the capital of a Central European country and recently visited my parents at the countryside. They needed me to help deal with some trees they wanted to fell. I assumed they wanted to finally make short work of these semi-healthy trees along the driveway that kept branching into the way, but no, they decided that the row of beeches at the southeastern corner of the property had to go. You should know 3 things here. 1, those trees are really tall, like 15 meters, about 50 feet, and rather thin. 2, there's an equally high barn just a few meters behind those trees on the neighbor's property to the south. It's pretty old, but has been renovated time and time again to serve as a storage and party location. 3, in front of the trees are compost containers, a crooked walnut tree, and bushes that my mother planted, creating a corridor of only around 7 meters, 23 feet, for the trees to land in without breaking anything. Also important, my sister, also living in a bigger city and not present when these events took place, and I, actually are the co-owners of the house and property as my father transferred ownership to us some years ago. While so far those beeches had survived their fair share of storms, they'd probably become a problem as they kept growing. And since new neighbors on the property bordering on the eastern side are in the process of building a house, they'd be their problem as well. So I agreed that they had to go. However, my parents wanted to fell them by themselves, meaning my dad would be the one to operate the chainsaw on them. He worked as a technician before retiring, always did a lot of repair and building work in and around the house, but he's past 70, has adopted a rather unhealthy lifestyle after leaving the workforce, and his eyesight and motor skills, while still perfectly suited for most kinds of technical operations, have deteriorated a bit. Knowing this, I objected and suggested hiring a professional to do the job and sharing the costs. I argued that any damage, beechwood's pretty heavy, or injury that might occur if things went sideways wouldn't be covered by insurance and thus come in quite costly. Also, doing this without even as much as notifying the local authorities might be illegal. Okay, it's the countryside, if any regulations of such kind even exist. Folks here like to interpret them as friendly advice rather than an actual law. But I digress. My parents wouldn't have any of it and even refused to get an estimate from a professional. I did some basic research and found out that the cost would probably come in at around 500 to 1,000 euro, $600 to $1,200. Not a small sum, but the forester or lumberjack who'd take up the work would be responsible for any damage. No dice, even after trying to bring my points across several times. Nah, we don't need a professional. Why should we waste money when we can do it by ourselves, they said. It'll be fine, they said, literally. And while I'm usually able to put them off bad ideas by convincing one of them, this time both of them were hell-bent on going for it. And once that's the case, all hope is basically lost, as especially my mother can be the most stubborn as heck. At least I know whom I inherited this trait from. As property co-owner, I technically could have just forbidden my parents to fell those trees on their own, but they're my parents. I love them, they're adults, they live there and keep stuff in order, so I refrained from taking this route. So I told them that they should go ahead if they really want to, but I wouldn't help them with this. My mom asked if I would help them cutting it up and carry the wood once the trees were laying on the ground. Important aspect. I agreed. Also, I begged them to wait for my sister to call them the next day at lunchtime since I messaged her about the situation and she wanted to back me up. But no, next morning I was woken up by Mother calling me to help cutting up the first tree which my father had brought down successfully. So I dutifully crawled out of bed and did my part in this little deforestation project. Tree 2 and 3 out of 5 were also felled without any incidents. Then came tree 4. My father apparently had not seen a higher-up branch that stretched between the branches of tree 5, so the chainsaw had fully severed the stem. Instead of falling sideways as intended, it got caught up, swirled around on its axis, and crashed into the walnut tree, which started to bend significantly due to the load. Now they wanted me to help moving the beech by pushing it to roll along the edge of one of the walnut tree's main branches. Besides me knowing that this wasn't doable, as I said, 15 meters high tree is a heavy affair, I refused. But you said you'd help us once the tree is felled, they pleaded. I pointed out that I'd only assist once it was laying on the ground, and leaning into the walnut tree doesn't quite fit that definition. More pleading, but now it was my time to be stubborn, and rightfully so. Since there would be no way to, or machinery, to pull the beech away, my father decided to cut parts of its lower stem until handling it would be possible. Multiple laws of physics, however, intervened after he'd cut a large second chunk, shifting the center of mass of the beech so that it suddenly started to tilt when its branches prevented it from sliding downward as intended. Then the walnut tree reacted to the lighter load and shift of balance by springing back, knocking the beech into the neighbor's barn like a battering ram. The dry wooden wall planks didn't stand a chance and splintered away as the felled tree forced its way into the building, creating an impressive hole. My parents now stood there dumbfounded. My dad slowly scratched his head and tried to realize the situation, while my mother slowly started to panic. Oh no, 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 what do we do now? What if the neighbor calls the police on us? I had watched the spectacle from the balcony and couldn't decide whether to be shocked or to descend into uncontrollable laughter. Closer investigation from the outside showed that the tree had crushed a chair, a table, and also caused a cupboard with party equipment to collapse, though my dad had at least reached his goal of freeing the beech from the grasp of the walnut tree, but there was no way of getting it unstuck from the barn without entering. A few hours later, the neighbor, who knew about my parents' plans, returned home, which is where this story might have taken a very bitter and costly turn. But he proved to be a very gracious guy and took the incident, which in the worst case could have made the whole barn collapse, in stride. He first was negatively amazed by what had transpired, but after inspection of the barn, he didn't deem it to be necessary to involve the insurance or officials and said he'd repair the damage by himself if my parents agreed to pay for the materials, replacement of the destroyed furniture, thanks neighbor, and some beer. Probably a lot of beer for his time, which they gladly accepted. His bill isn't yet in, and he's just begun patching up the hole, but it'll easily be upwards of 2,000 euros, roughly $2,400, plus the beer, of course, still making a professional tree removal look like a really good deal. My father offered to assist him with the repairs. The neighbor thought about it for the fraction of a second, then politely declined. I wonder why. P.S. Tree 5 is still standing. And our last story. Don't like our slow gas pumps? Take your business someplace else. This happened many years ago at the company I currently work for. At the time, we had about 130 company vehicles at our location and our own fuel pumps. Our location is a few miles outside of town. There was one small, privately owned gas station within 100 yards of our company. It received a lot of our business because while we didn't get gas there, our employees would stop in the morning, lunch, and after work to pick things up. Their breakfast business was very strong. One of the owners was very rude. She'd curse at us to hurry up and pick what we wanted, but for the most part, they were okay. There was a change in the law on below-ground fuel pumps, and we found that we could no longer provide our own fuel to company vehicles. As a result, we made a deal with this small gas station to provide all the fuel for our company. Right away, it was a nightmare. They only had 4 regular pumps and 1 diesel pump. While the regular cars could fuel up at different times, our large trucks would bottle up bad in the morning at the 1 pump. So we sat down with them and requested they install a fast diesel pump designed for large trucks. I was actually in on that meeting. The wife just laughed at us. She said there was no way in hell she'd pay for that, and if we didn't like it, we could take our business elsewhere. In her mind, we didn't have a lot of options, and even if we did, she still would have all of our breakfast, lunch, and after-work business. So we did. We didn't want a repeat of what was happening at this location, so we supplied all employees with a COM data card so that they could get fuel any place they wanted. This hurt that business more than anyone could have realized. With our employees now stopping at the locations of their choice, they no longer needed to stop to pick up snacks, drinks, or food at this store. Their morning, lunch, and after-work business evaporated. 3 months later, they came to our company to let us know they would now install the new pump. We told them it was too late. I still remember after we said no, the angry woman got mad again and used the F word. 1 month after that, just the husband came by and asked if there was anything he could do to get our business back. We had a signed contract and was actually saving us money, so we said no. They closed the store about a year after that and tried to sell the location for $1 million. It sat for years until it finally went for about $100,000 to a veterinary clinic. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.